Every American reality television star has a story that begins long before the cameras ever arrived. For Amy Roloff, that story begins in Michigan, in a family of 4 children, with 2 average-height parents, in a Christian household that emphasized faith, hard work, and the idea that God does not make mistakes. Before Amy Roloff was a Roloff, she was Amy Jo Knight, the youngest child of Gordon and Patricia Knight, a little girl with a form of dwarfism called achondroplasia, a little girl whose parents had no experience with dwarfism when she was born, a little girl who was raised, nevertheless, to believe that her body was not a mistake, that her life had purpose, and that the world was full of possibilities for her if she was willing to work for them. Tonight on LPBW Update, we are walking through the full story of the Michigan family that raised Amy Roloff. Her father, Gordon Knight, who worked for Ford Motor Company. Her mother, Patricia Knight, who anchored the family in the Christian faith that would shape Amy's entire life. Her 3 older siblings, Katherine, Roger, and the late Cyndi Knight, who died in 2015. The high school Amy attended in Livonia, Michigan. The Central Michigan University education that gave Amy the business skills she would use for the rest of her career. The cabin on Lake Michigan where the Knight family gathered over the decades, and the way the Michigan roots that Amy has never fully left behind continue to shape her identity in 2026. Because to understand Amy Roloff, you have to understand where she came from. And where she came from was a specific American family in a specific American place, doing what specific American families do, loving each other, facing challenges together, getting through the years the best they could, and giving Amy Jo Knight the foundation on which she would build the extraordinary life that has followed. Let us start with the basics. Amy Jo Knight was born on September 17, 1962, in Michigan. She was the 4th and youngest child of Gordon and Patricia Knight. Her 3 older siblings, all of whom were of average height and none of whom had achondroplasia, were her sisters Katherine and Cyndi and her brother Roger. When Amy was born with dwarfism, she was the first person in her family to have the condition. There was no family history. There were no other little people. There were no aunts or uncles or cousins with the same condition to whom the family could turn for guidance. Gordon and Patricia were, essentially, on their own in figuring out how to raise a child with a medical condition they did not fully understand. They had, according to Amy's own reflections in her memoir and in interviews, a period of adjustment. They had to learn. They had to seek out information. They had to figure out how to advocate for their daughter in schools, in medical settings, and in the broader community. And they had to find, somewhere within themselves, the ability to raise Amy with confidence, rather than with anxiety about her differences. Gordon Knight was a Ford Motor Company employee. His work at the automotive giant, one of the most iconic American companies of the 20th century, placed him firmly within the American manufacturing middle class of the 1950s, 1960s, and 1970s. Ford was, at that time, a stable and prestigious employer. It offered good wages, comprehensive benefits, and the kind of career stability that allowed workers to raise families with confidence about the future. Gordon's Ford income was what supported the Knight family. It paid for the house they lived in, the schools the children attended, and eventually the cabin on Lake Michigan that would become such an important gathering place for the extended Knight family over the decades. Gordon was, by every account, a hardworking, dependable, deeply committed father. He was of average height. He had no personal experience with dwarfism when Amy was born, but he had, by every measure, an unwavering commitment to loving his daughter and giving her whatever she needed to thrive. Patricia Knight was the mother of the family, and by every account, she was the heart of the Knight household. She was a Christian woman with deep faith. She raised her 4 children with the values she had received from her own upbringing. She emphasized kindness, hard work, personal responsibility, and love of God. She was, in Amy's telling, particularly important in modeling for Amy how to face challenges with grace. When Amy came home from school upset because she had been bullied, when Amy struggled with feeling different from her peers, when Amy wondered whether the world would ever fully accept her, Patricia was there. Patricia listened. Patricia comforted. Patricia reinforced the same anchoring truth that Amy's father would tell her over and over again through her childhood. God does not make mistakes. God had a purpose for Amy. Her body was not a defect. Her differences were not a punishment. She was made exactly the way God intended her to be, and her purpose in life was to figure out what God wanted her to do with the person she was. That phrase, God does not make mistakes, has become one of the defining truths of Amy Roloff's public life. She has quoted it in interviews. She has written about it in her memoir. She has referenced it in speeches. She has used it as a compass point for how she approaches everything from parenting to marriage to advocacy work to career decisions. The phrase came from her father, not her mother, though both parents reinforced it throughout her childhood. Gordon Knight would tell Amy, when she was struggling with the pain of being different, that God did not make mistakes, that she was exactly who she was meant to be, that her purpose would reveal itself over time, that she should not spend her energy wishing she was someone else because the person she was, in all her uniqueness, was the person God had specifically created her to be. That kind of parental anchoring, delivered consistently across the years of a child's development, is one of the most valuable gifts any parent can give a child. And Amy received it in full from both her father and her mother. Amy has spoken publicly about the childhood bullying she experienced growing up as a little person in a Michigan community that was not always accepting of her differences. She was called names. She was excluded from activities. She was, at times, the target of cruelty from other children. What is interesting is that Amy's parents did not fully know how bad the bullying was at the time. Amy has said that she did not tell her parents everything that was happening. She held some of the pain inside because she did not want them to worry. She wanted to be strong for them. Amy's brother Roger has confirmed on Little People Big World that this was the case. He and his siblings knew about some of the bullying, but they did not tell their parents about all of it either. There is a certain kind of family loyalty in that behavior, a certain kind of protective instinct where children shield their parents from hurt, even as the children themselves are being hurt. Roger, in particular, has said he did what he could to protect his sister. Amy has said he was a good big brother in that way. The three older Knight siblings, Katherine, Roger, and Cyndi, all took on protective roles for their younger sister at various times. That kind of family solidarity, where older siblings look out for a younger sibling who is being singled out for cruelty by others, was foundational to Amy's understanding of what family should be. Amy attended Franklin High School in Livonia, Michigan. Livonia is a suburb of Detroit, part of the greater Metro Detroit area that was, in the 1970s when Amy was in high school, deeply connected to the automotive industry. Amy graduated from high school with the intention of pursuing higher education. She was accepted to Central Michigan University in Mount Pleasant, Michigan, where she enrolled to study business. Her time at Central Michigan University was formative. She graduated with a Bachelor of Business Administration, focusing on human resources and hospitality. Those two fields would prove important later in her life, when she used the skills she had learned in college to build her business ventures and manage her media career. Amy has often referenced her Central Michigan University background in interviews. She is proud of the education she received there. She is proud of the discipline it required, and she is proud that she was able to complete a college degree despite the additional challenges that came with being a little person in a college environment that was not always designed for someone of her stature. After college, Amy briefly worked in Silicon Valley's high-tech industry before transitioning to early childhood education. She worked as a preschool teacher in the Portland, Oregon area after she married Matt. That combination of business training and early childhood education would eventually inform much of her career, from her Amy Roloff Charity Foundation work with at-risk youth to her cookbook and media career. Her Michigan upbringing had given her the foundation. Her college years had given her the credentials, and her early adult experiences had given her the flexibility to build a life across multiple careers and industries. The Knight family had a cabin on Lake Michigan in the Upper Peninsula of the state. Gordon and Patricia lived in the Upper Peninsula for much of their later years. The cabin was, in Amy's telling, a place of gathering. The extended family would come together there. Grandchildren would visit. Photos would be taken by the water. Meals would be shared around a common table. That cabin represented, in some ways, the anchoring physical space of the Knight family identity. Amy would visit it when she returned to Michigan over the years. She would take her own children there. She would take her grandchildren. And the physical continuity of that place, generation after generation, gave Amy a sense of rootedness that has served her well as an adult who has spent most of her life in Oregon, thousands of miles away from where she grew up. In August of 2018, Amy made a special trip back to Michigan to celebrate a major milestone. Her father, Gordon Knight, turned 90 years old. 90. That is a remarkable achievement in itself. Gordon had lived through the entire 20th century, plus the first decade and a half of the 21st. He had lived through the Great Depression, World War II, the Cold War, the space race, the Civil Rights Movement, the rise and fall of American manufacturing, and every major event of American life since the late 1920s. And on his 90th birthday, his youngest daughter, Amy Roloff, by then a famous reality television star with grandchildren of her own, flew back to Michigan to be with him. She shared photos on Instagram from the celebration. Gordon was smiling. Patricia, then 85, was by his side. The extended Knight family was gathered. It was, by every measure, a beautiful family celebration. And it was one of the last major family gatherings that Patricia would attend before her death. In early June of 2019, Patricia Knight was hospitalized with a bone infection. Amy shared updates on Instagram. She said her mother's heart was weak, but her mind was sharp. She said the transition of slowing down and not doing all Patricia wanted to do would be hard for her mother. She said the family just needed to appreciate the moments, what Patricia could still do, and the days that were left. That kind of caregiver honesty, publicly shared, was Amy at her most vulnerable and most graceful. She was preparing herself and her fans for the reality that her mother was in her final chapter of life. On September 24th, 2019, Patricia Knight passed away at the age of 86. She died in a Michigan hospital with Gordon by her side. They had been married for nearly 67 years. Amy shared the news publicly. She shared her grief. She traveled to Michigan for the funeral. She was surrounded by her siblings, her father, and her extended family. In October of 2019, she posted a series of photos on Instagram showing the family gathered in Michigan to celebrate her mother's life. The first photo showed Amy, her brother Roger, her sister Katherine, and their father standing together at a cemetery. Cyndi, who had died in 2015, was represented in the family's collective memory, but was not physically present. The photos captured a family in grief, but also in gratitude for a mother and wife who had lived a long, full, meaningful life. That is the family that raised Amy Roloff. Gordon Knight, the Ford Motor Company employee whose Michigan wages built the childhood home. Patricia Knight, the Christian mother whose faith and love gave Amy her spiritual foundation. Katherine, Roger, and Cyndi, the three older siblings who grew up alongside Amy and who each played their role in the family constellation. The cabin on Lake Michigan, the Franklin High School years, the Central Michigan University degree, the bullying that shaped Amy's toughness, the faith that shaped Amy's identity. All of it happened in Michigan. All of it happened before Amy ever met Matt Roloff at a Little People of America conference in 1986. All of it happened before Amy ever moved to Oregon, before she ever bought Roloff Farms, before she ever appeared on national television. The Michigan years were the foundation. Everything Amy has become since has been built on top of that foundation. Amy has returned to Michigan many times over the years. She goes back to visit her surviving father, Gordon. She goes back to visit her siblings, Katherine and Roger. She goes back to the cabin. She goes back to the cemetery where her mother, Patricia, and her sister, Cyndi, are buried. She goes back because Michigan is, in her own words, home. Even after decades in Oregon, Even after building a life and a family and a career 3,000 miles away, Michigan remains home in some deep sense. It is where she was made. It is where her parents raised her. It is where her siblings shared her childhood. It is the place her heart has never fully left. At Amy's wedding to Chris Marek on August 28, 2021, at Roloff Farms, her father Gordon walked her down the aisle. This was significant. Amy had already been married once before, to Matt in 1987. Gordon had walked Amy down the aisle then too, at their Michigan wedding 34 years earlier. In 2021, 34 years later, Gordon was there again. He walked his youngest daughter down the aisle for the second time in her life. She was 58 years old. He was 93. The father-daughter bond that had begun with him telling her as a child that God does not make mistakes had now spanned nearly 6 decades. And in that moment, walking his daughter down the aisle to marry Chris Marek, Gordon was giving her the same gift he had given her the first time: his blessing, his love, his confidence that she was making the right choice. Patricia was not there. She had died 2 years earlier. But Amy said publicly that she was grateful to have gotten engaged to Chris before her mother died, so that her mother could be certain her daughter was going to be okay. Patricia had blessed the relationship in her own way, from her hospital bed, before she passed. And Gordon, walking Amy down the aisle at Roloff Farms, was carrying forward both his own love and Patricia's love into the ceremony. That is the Michigan story of Amy Roloff. It is a family story. It is a faith story. It is a story of endurance across generations. It is a story of siblings supporting siblings, parents guiding children, and a family finding its way through the ordinary challenges of American life. It is not a story that reality television captured. It is not a story that is easily condensed into an episode of Little People, Big World. It is, instead, the quiet story underneath all the other stories. The foundation that made everything else possible. The Knight family, in a Michigan house, raising a little girl who would grow up to change the way America thinks about families with dwarfism. That is the story that started it all, and it deserves to be remembered. So I want to know what you think. What do you think Amy Roloff's Michigan upbringing gave her that has served her throughout her life? Do you think the phrase, "God does not make mistakes," which her father Gordon repeated to her throughout her childhood, has been the anchor of her adult identity? And do you think Amy will eventually move back to Michigan someday to be closer to her father and her surviving siblings? Or do you think Oregon will remain her permanent home? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one and I love hearing from you. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, subscribe to LPBW Update, and ring the bell so you do not miss our weekly Roloff family stories. We are committed to bringing you the truth, the timeline, and the heart of every member of this remarkable family. I will see you on the next one.